Greetings from Pooler, Georgia. This is David Lotz.
And Diana Lotz.
And we're finally getting around to sending this DVD to you as a thank you for your support for our 2017 trip to Zimbabwe. We apologize that we didn't get this to you sooner, but our lives have been extremely busy. We created this DVD as a thank you and also to give a visual report of how your donations and prayers were answered on this trip. So, let's begin. The sponsoring organization for this trip was Nurses for the Nations. It's a parachurch organization located in Richmond Hill, Georgia, which is just slightly south of us, but is also affiliated with our church, Compassion Christian. The trip was also partnered with the African Development Mission, actually in Zimbabwe. In addition to the support letters we sent out last year, we approached our local dentist, and he gave us all sorts of supplies for one of our talks that we gave at Zimbabwe.
And then my work surprised me with a lot of donations, items for the children and for the school. We had baby dolls and footballs and basketballs and all sorts of things that kids would enjoy that we were able to pack and take along with us. After we got everything packed, we had 4 big duffel bags full of supplies and clothes and toys for everyone that came to the clinic.
After packing and the day we left for our trip, we met this crew from Savannah down actually at the Jacksonville airport. And here we are getting ready to go through and check in. Our 32-and-a-half-hour trip took us from Jacksonville to Dulles Airport in Washington, D.C., across the Atlantic to Dakar, then after refueling down to Johannesburg, changing flights there, we flew to Harare, and that's where we completed our 32-and-a-half-hour trip. Harare is the capital of Zimbabwe, and the ADMT mission is located very close. We've met up with the ADMT portion of our team. This is after going through customs and obtaining our local visas. The leaders of the ADMT team is Denford and Shigi Chizanga. They are also the missionaries that our church, Compassion Christian, supports. After a good night's sleep, we met inside the ADMT headquarters and we were preparing to go to church. The church that we attended was nearby at Rua, and as you can see, this is a typical African church building. The American team is gathered and sat, and we're waiting for the rest of the congregates to arrive. We were regaled with tunes from the worship team. This is the worship team in the church. Monday morning was an early get-up. Here's part of our team in the first van headed for Chipinge. This was a 9-hour drive, and actually Diana and I are sitting ahead of the folks in this picture. The first leg of our trip took us from Harare to the eastern edge of Zimbabwe to a town called Mutare. Mutare was a welcome pit stop. This is where we got snacks and picked up pizza for later to eat on the road. A little over an hour later was where we finally stopped to eat our cold pizza. Marked in red shows our trip from Harare south and east to the remote mountain village of Chipinge. We arrived about 5 o'clock at the clinic building, and we were greeted by the local church. They were singing praise songs, and the ladies and the children were welcoming us. ADMT provides ladies of the church the red and the white uniforms so that they have something really nice to wear to church. The building you see here was our multi-purpose clinic building for the 4 days that would be on top of the mountain.
It would serve as our place where we would have our meals It also served as our pharmacy. Every day we would have to unpack the pharmacy when we were ready for clinic, then pack it back up for lunch, unpack it again for the afternoon, and set it up, and then pack it up at night.
Here's the team preparing all of the pharmacy packets from the bulk that we had brought. As you can see, this was the pharmacy room and the dining room in this small 4-room building. While the medical folks were preparing the medications, just Dave decided to help the women pump at the well. Now, there needs some explanation because at the Jacksonville airport, we were introducing ourselves, and one of the team members asked what I was bringing to the team. And I said, well, I am just I'm not a medical person. And she said, well, you're just Dave. And that name kind of stuck for the whole trip. The well that is located here is one of several that Compassion Christian has sponsored and worked with ADMT to actually dig. One of the things that we noticed the whole time during our trip when we were at the clinic, there were no men at all manning the pumps or carrying the water to the gardens. The men were off to the side and only women and older children were at the pump.
This picture shows the community garden that they have started growing. And unfortunately, it's mainly the women and older children that take care of the garden. The local schools also have gardens, and part of the curriculum is each grade has a row of vegetables that they have to maintain and grow, and then they share the profits. In order to get water to the garden, back in the other picture you saw those 5-gallon buckets, and the women would fill those buckets from the well, put them on their heads, and carry them to the garden and water the garden. Also in the back, you see the mountain range. That is actually Mozambique.
Being in the southern hemisphere, September is early spring, and in this picture you can see just how dusty and dry the land is during this time of year. After finishing preparations for tomorrow's clinic, this is the school where we were put up at night. The ladies were in one of the classrooms, the men in the other, and yet some of the ADMT team members were put in a third classroom. This was the men's sleeping room. You can see the desks and tables have all been moved to the wall, and our sleeping accommodations were 1-inch thick foam mattresses and sleeping bags. The ladies' room was very similar to this, but the ladies got air mattresses to sleep on. Every day on the mountain started at 5 in the morning. We had a local rooster that decided that 3 a.m. was a great time to start his day, though. In the distance, you can see the mountains, but in the center of the photograph is a concrete building that was our restroom and our shower facilities.
Here is a picture of what the restrooms look like. This is actually up by the clinic, but even where we spent the night, the restrooms are actually holes in the ground. No seat, no bench, just actually a hole in the ground, and no handlebars to help you get back up, so you hoped you didn't fall in.
Every morning when we arrived, there were local people already lined up waiting for our arrival. Every morning after breakfast, we would all sit together and there would be a morning devotional provided by one of the local pastors. This was given to us and also to the locals who had already arrived. There was a small hill just outside the clinic, and that's where the men, the women, and the children all gathered for this devotional time. Each one of these devotional times included music, and it was worshipful, praiseful music that they provided. As you can see, we were all well protected by the local authorities standing there with their billy club.
As you can see, we participated in the devotional time too. And here, David and Dr. Jeff provided musical harmonies singing How Great Thou Art. This slide shows that after morning devotions, one of our nurses would give a health education clinic. This education clinic was done by one of the nurses with one of the nurse translators of the area to translate for us. In this picture, it's showing our nurse practitioner, Pam, with her translator doing oral hygiene, showing how to brush their teeth and for how long. After each educational clinic, we would hand out gift bags of supplies that pertain to that clinic. So here, everybody got toothpaste, toothbrush from our dentist. We had put them in little baggies to give to everybody. This slide shows myself doing the clinical teaching on wound care. David volunteered to be my victim.
Patient.
My patient, because he had a scratch on his arm. And I used my approach by having the locals answer questions. And then they would have to tell me what I needed to do at the end. So I think they learned, and we handed out skin care and Band-Aids and soap with this clinic. Each day of clinic, we had different stations, and as you can see, our clinic was outside, and with the hot sun and the temperatures, it got quite warm. So we had a tarp over the front, and all of this is in front of that little building that you saw previously. We had different stations. Station 1 was the triage, where each local came in. They had a paper. We put their name down as much as we could, and we took their vital signs. And here is Kelly and myself in the triage. We also have the local pastors helping us with triage and keeping the line straight. The second station was the assessment. They would come in, and one of us nurses, along with our nurse translator, and in this picture is Evangelista. She was one of our translators. And we would ask them, why are you in clinic today? What is your problem? What is your symptoms? And then they would start explaining. In the nurse's hand there, you can see that is Emmy Grace. You can see she's holding a list of medications that we were provided with. And according to the symptoms that the patient was describing, we could look at, like if it was a stomach ache, it could be worms, it could just be intestinal problems. And we would look at that, and it gave a list of medications that we would then prescribe that we had brought with us. We'd write down their symptoms, we'd write down what we're having them pick up at pharmacy. In the background by the building, you can see Dr. Jeff is there. He was on call for all of us nurses. If by chance we just could not figure out the best medicine to give for them for the symptoms they were showing, he would come and assess and prescribe what they needed. We kept him busy. We actually had 3 stations for assessment. The last station was pharmacy, and they would leave the assessment station with their paper. They would come get in line at the window and present the paper to the people working the pharmacy, and it would tell them what to give to the patient and how to take it and what to do with it. A lot of the medications, we made sure everybody got some Tylenol, even the children's Tylenol. We made sure they got vitamins, especially the women and the children. In this slide, this is on the inside of the pharmacy, and you can see all of the medications and baggies on the table. You also see David there. Besides the name Just Dave, he also became known as Pharmacist Dave. As you can see, David also needed a translator there to make sure that the patient knew exactly what they were taking, why they were taking it, and how to take it.
This was a typical line for every day that we held clinic. It was this way from after our devotional section all the way up until 5 o'clock when we shut down clinic.
This slide shows the outdoor kitchen that was there at the clinic. The ladies, certain ladies, were assigned making our meals as well as for making meals for the locals that were there for clinic. Here they're making sudza, which is a staple of theirs. It's cornmeal, and it's made in the consistency that they can mold it into like a spoon and use it as a spoon. And then when they're done, they can actually eat it. As the slide shows, the pharmacy became our dining room for us to eat, so we could eat in peace and as a team. Here in the red cap is Adeline. She is part of the ADMT team, and she was our cook the whole time we were there. She made sure that we had good meals, and she would set the place up very nice. The other lady shown here is one of the local pastor's wives, and I love to hear her sing praises to the Lord.
So here's what sudza looks like when it's plated, with greens from the garden and chicken, which was a staple for us almost every day. Wasn't so for the locals. The chicken was something special just for us team members. Here Kelly is sampling some sugar cane. On our way down, we actually drove through a sugarcane plantation. Kelly thought it was really good, but I needed to really be careful. I tried one morning to put some of the unrefined sugar on my cereal, and it was just 1 tablespoonful, but boy, it did a number with my blood sugar. I was working in the pharmacy, and one of the nurses came up and she goes, "David, do you feel all right?" And I said, "No, I don't really feel good." And so she took my blood pressure, and she goes, "We need to check your blood sugar." And when they did,
it was over 400. So they sent David and I back to where we spent the night. I was his personal nurse, made him drink plenty of water. He took an extra metformin sugar for his blood sugar, and then we finally got his blood sugar down. But it was during that time we discovered it was from the unrefined sugar that shot it up. So he had no more sugar on the trip.
It's after lunch, and as I spoke earlier, there's still a line waiting to be seen. Well, after lunch, they decided to rotate positions, and I got my first taste at working the triage station. So no longer was I Pharmacist Dave, I became Triage Dave, and I was actually taking temperatures and blood pressures at this part of the stage. This day, Diana and I actually got to work together in a station, which was a rare occasion.
If a patient showed signs, possible signs of malaria, or wanted HIV counseling, we took them around to the little room on the back side of the clinic where we actually had test kits that we could check for malaria or HIV. HIV is one of the big diseases in Africa. And a lot of education and follow-up is being done in the area of HIV over there. We only, during our stay, found one patient with HIV, but she was already a known HIV patient. Nobody else tested positive for it.
There was one period during the day where we all got to step away from the clinic duties and got to play with the children. They loved us being there, and they just followed us wherever we went. Diana, I think, had the most fun with the kids. She taught them line dancing and how to do the hokey pokey, and even did follow the leader with them. One evening, we were able to meet with the teachers at the local school where we were actually staying and to present them supplies and gifts that we brought from the States. This is one morning actually at the school, and all the local kids there in their uniforms doing assembly where they would sing, they would say their Pledge of Allegiance to their flag before they actually started classes. With the clinics all done, it was Saturday morning, and we actually held a morning church service before we left. During that service, we actually had 2 men come forward and accepted Christ. That morning, we gathered all the local pastors and their wives together with a photograph for all of us. During the time there, I was asked the first night if I would do the nightly devotions, which we had every night. And every night after that, I was pressed to do the devotions. They all wanted to start calling me now Pastor Dave, but I said, no, I'm not a pastor. I'm not trained. You can call me Teacher Dave. So that was one of the other many hats that I wore during this trip. After leaving the mountain village of Chipenge over what was the roughest road I have ever ridden on, we were able to do some sightseeing. And here we stopped at the Birchenough Bridge over the Save River. You can see it's early spring, and there's not much of the river left. It's pretty much all dry riverbed at this point. And here is our whole team, both the folks from the U.S. and all of our ADMT partners as well. After we returned to Rua, we were able to attend one additional church service there. Here's the whole gang with Denford and Chingy, and we actually were able to take part in this service. We read scriptures, we sang, we actually took part in the worship service. The next few slides have been taken at a wildlife preserve that we got to visit after the church service on Sunday. Here we see a zebra out in the open field. There were giraffes there. This one was reaching up to get some leaves off the tree out of the rock. Here's a monkey sitting on a rock begging for peanuts that we were able to take along. And in the background is yet another giraffe.
This is one of my favorite slides. I even have this picture on my phone. This lion is just right outside the window of our van. There's no fences between us and him. Of course, you know me and my animals. I was having a ball.
Here the whole team posed with a Galapagos turtle that was in Zimbabwe. Go figure. It's now Monday morning, and we are headed to the airport. As you can see, it's early spring and all the trees are in full bloom. We unloaded the vans and the team took their luggage and we were headed into the airport. Here we're almost home. We were flying over Savannah on our way to the Jacksonville airport.
We have some exciting news. God has laid on our heart and given us the opportunity to go back to Chipenge this fall from September 5th through September 18th. My prayer for many years was that David would go with me on a mission trip. 2 years ago, he went with me to Zimbabwe. It was on the way home, David mentioned he would be willing to go again sometime. but not every year. Well, when we were giving our presentation at David's home church, a gentleman came up to us and asked us if we were going to go back. And we said yes, we were open to go back, and presented us with a nice support check, a large check. So that was God's way of telling us He wanted us to go back. We have the opportunity this fall. We're actually leaving on our anniversary to head back to Zimbabwe.
Now, we've enclosed the paperwork that you need to support us if you choose so financially, but we also ask that you be in prayer for us during this trip. There are dangers on this trip. We're going into an area that was hit hard by a cyclone this year, and there is, of course, disease and things that we hopefully will not encounter, but there are dangers involved with this trip. So again, we ask not only that you consider to provide financial support for us, but most assuredly you can provide prayer support for us.
One of the other dangers that we're facing is political unrest still. We ask for prayer for that and for our safety.
But most of all, we want to say thank you for the support that you provided us 2 years ago. And again, we apologize. It took us so long to get this thank you out. But we do appreciate it, and thank you.
Thank you.